Ose's life had always been chaotic, but nothing prepared him for the day he found out he had fathered 120 children. It started when he was just 22. Ose, a tall and charming man, had always been the center of attention. He worked as a bartender in a busy city, and his natural charisma made him popular with women. At first, it was just a few flings. One-night stands that meant nothing more than a little fun. But as time went on, Ose started noticing a pattern. Many of the women he slept with would later disappear from his life completely. He didn't think much of it. He never felt any responsibility toward them. His life was about living in the moment, no strings attached. The women came and went. Sometimes, he never even saw them again after that night. But a few years later, something strange began happening. He started getting messages from women he barely remembered. "I'm pregnant," they would say, or "Your child is due in 2 months." At first, Ose thought it was just a coincidence. But soon, it became clear that this was no accident. One after another, women who he barely knew began contacting him, each claiming he was the father of their child. Some were just looking for child support, others wanted him involved in their kids' lives, but many were simply trying to get his attention. Ose tried to ignore it. He didn't want to be tied down. He was young, free, and living for himself. But the messages kept coming, sometimes from women in other cities, even other countries. By the time he was 28, he had already been named on birth certificates for at least 50 children. Then came the surprise: he was contacted by a paternity clinic. They'd done DNA testing on several of his children and found that he was the father of 120 kids, spread across the country. The clinic wanted to know if he wanted to be involved in their lives. Ose was stunned. How had he let it get so out of control? For the first time in his life, he felt the weight of his actions. But it was too late to undo anything. His life was no longer his own. He had 120 children scattered across the country, many of whom had no idea who their real father was. Some of the women had kept quiet, not wanting to ruin their lives or bring shame. Others had told their kids, but many of the children grew up without ever knowing their dad. Ose couldn't even remember half the women he had slept with. The media caught wind of his story, and suddenly Ose was famous for all the wrong reasons. He became the subject of gossip and scandal, his face splashed across tabloids and news sites. Some people called him irresponsible, others said he was a victim of his own behavior. Ose didn't know who to blame anymore. He thought about all the children he'd never met, the lives that had been affected by his recklessness. What did it mean to be a father? Could he make things right, or was it already too late? The reality of his situation hit him hard. Ose had lived his life with no real direction, never considering the consequences of his actions. Now, at 30 years old, he was stuck with a past he could never escape. No amount of apologies or explanations could change what had happened. He was the father of 120 children, and the truth was, some of them would never even know his name. In the end, Ose realized there was nothing he could do to fix the mess he'd made. The only thing left was to live with the consequences, a man forever tied to a past he couldn't undo.